This is going to be an update on the blog I'm working on and the next episode in a series of meditations on media. I'm not really ready to present anything yet, but I suppose this is more or less just me sort of rambling, you could say. It's been very interesting gathering information for this next installment of this educational series. I have been very surprised by just how much symbolism, how many references to particular esoteric, occult arts there are in this game. It's been honestly amazing, to be truthful. I never would have expected I would have found so much. Whether the symbolism is, I suppose, how would I say it, sort of incidental, or accidental, so to speak, I have to say I don't really think so. That's my observation. Things seem too intentional, and I think most people who play this game, or even any one of these Souls games, and really any piece of art or media for the most part, they tend to think that things within it, the narrative, all of the symbolism, is simply for entertainment purposes, and that they're not really presented to teach a lesson. I see so many lore videos, and truth be told, at this point I think it can be said that FromSoft and their games, the trend started of basically going into the lore, as they call it, of anything. Of course, that has a long history. In this game, D&D, though, Final Fantasy, but of course Final Fantasy is not nearly as symbolic as a game like this, such as Elden Ring or Dark Souls. They are just full of it, really. It's so much of it that I think most people, even if they do understand some of it, they're just so inundated with symbolism and cultural references, most of which are not exoteric. They're not normal or ordinary things that we come into contact on a daily basis in our day-to-day life. Concepts existential concepts, different things having to do with philosophy and religion. Which, to be entirely honest, it's very strange that people don't seem to have a definite opinion about it. Though that's not necessarily true. And I've recognized that as I've searched the internet and read different blogs, watched different videos, looked at different forum posts, went to Reddit, and I saw a lot of different theories and ideas there. But it is interesting because I think Elden Ring, much like the beginning of RPGs, so to speak, D&D, one's decisions in regard to how they play oftentimes show more about the individual who is playing it than the game, or rather the so-called lore itself. And that was and I think I had recognized that years ago, but now especially it seems to be very, very, very clear to me that that is true. Some of you may already know, but of course, before we begin to talk about this, basically the conversation is all over the place. This is just stream of thought, me and my personal meditations. This whole conversation is going to be disconnected, but before I go to the next point, I'd just like to say, what we're doing here is entirely educational, so to speak. I see a lot of people, even people who, some particular individuals who are reviewing this game and trying to understand the sort of philosophical and ideological and religious aspects of it, the story. They're trying to discern what influence Miyazaki or George R.R. Martin has had. They're having plenty of fun, to be entirely honest. For them, this is an enjoyable thing. Most people who are actually talking about the story, they're talking about it, and I mean the lore, and I mean the narrative, what this media is. They're being very, how should I say this? Extremely positive. Extremely positive. They approve of what the game is. They approve of what the game represents. They approve of FromSoft, of the Souls games. We have to remember, or at least I feel the need to note and to basically remember that this is a game series that basically began as you, a protagonist who was basically devouring souls, essentially, and gaining power from souls. It's already a disturbing premise. It's already a very disturbing and morally questionable premise. But not many people seem to find that at all objectionable. And here, in the whole Meditations on Media series, I'm simply meditating. And I hope you're meditating with me. These have been things that have been on my mind for years. And although our meditations on this channel often have to do with Japanese media in general, of course you've seen I've placed an emphasis on the Souls, on FromSoft's Souls games, because if you haven't noticed that they're the hottest thing in town right now, and that basically, regardless of their very simplistic game mechanics, most people in the RPG fandom, so to speak, the RPG fans in general, and even games fans in general, they basically see FromSoft's video games as the cream of the crop. There really is nothing better in the eyes of most people playing RPGs now. And it's very interesting, and I myself have been led to question why, considering that when you think about it, the storyline isn't really that in depth. I think the most peradventure profound storyline they had was in Demon Souls, to be honest. And ever since Demon Souls, the storyline, and even I would say to some degree the mechanics of the game, have become less intuitive. Some people may disagree, the game has become far better. And, things like world tendency are entirely gone. And I'm not saying that the game isn't easier to play now. There aren't more things to do. The games are longer, but there are things, for example, for those who've played, maybe you remember simple things that seemed to take more effort, or there was more attention to detail, such as in Demon Souls, you walk away from a person, let's say a vendor like Baldwin, and he says, hey, what's the rush, or something like that, or that's awfully rude. The characters had more, the dialogue was more substantial. The dialogue was far more substantial. So as I'm replaying these games, especially Demon Souls, I'm starting to realize that, and Dark Souls 2 did the same thing that Demon Souls did, in the sense that and not to say that Dark Souls 2 dialogue was, I'll just say that they did some, if you walked away from the character, they would say something. And they would say you were rude or something like that. That's sort of interesting. But, in Elden Ring, I can't really say much about, just the experience in terms of meeting NPCs, because it's very hard to find most NPCs. And the weird thing is that the game is more difficult to follow narratively. And it seems as though, with all due respect, it's almost as though basically everyone is sort of, how should I say this, lost hope in trying to actually understand what the game means themselves. They either go to the Elden Ring wiki, or they watch Vati Vidya. They watch his videos. or some of the lesser known people, such as Cassidy, who, her work is of a better quality. There is no doubt. Her approach is to some degree more scholarly, but she still is sort of a yes woman for FromSoft. Basically, she loves the game, she loves what they represent, she loves what the games teach, so to speak. And as to what they represent and what they teach and what one can learn from them, of course, I mean, this is a subjective matter. But as I was saying, the way you interpret it says something about yourself. In D&D, they have the same dynamic. They have their sort of, this is basically a mixture. The whole game, it's basically a mixture of different cultures, different religions, right? Different groups, different factions, and a lot of games are faction games. But this one in particular has a lot to do with religion, with faith, and some people may say, well, the scholars aren't religious in Rea Lucaria, the little magician group, so to speak, the astrologers. But they all have very cemented worldviews, and we can basically say that they are adhering to different religions. And a word like that has many different. It has a variety of meanings. It's an abstract word. And there are many such abstract words and concepts that are worthy of note, which is why if you read some of my blogs, many times I put dictionary. I basically cite dictionaries a lot of times, because for me, this whole experience of reviewing media is a process of trying to educate other people about just art and to some extent grammar, logic, philosophy, religion, all sorts of things. If we don't know what the words mean, for a lot of this research, it's very hard for us to understand it. Sure, I could just make a blog or a video and just say, well, if they're intelligent enough, they'll understand it. But the English language is just full of so many words that, I just think it's courtesy and to basically share definitions. They're easy to find, and they help people understand what you're actually trying to convey, which to me is more important than anything else, really. But yes, as I was saying, this game is basically a fight between different groups of different religions. They all believe different things, and depending on what you, the player, believe, you'll choose different outcomes. There's, I believe, 6 endings, as far as I know. And they all represent something different. And Some of you may have already played the game or not, but basically what I found, most of the people who, and these are just my observations, but before, let me say something else. There's always two major groups in these games, and I reviewed it in Demon Souls in terms of narrative archetypes. Christian archetype and a sort of magical, magician, wizard, witch type archetype. Alright? And this game does the same thing. We see two different archetypes. You have your Golden Order people who are basically following a type of religion that is similar to Christianity, that seems to be heavily influenced by Christianity, that seems to, for the most part, have a narrative role in this game that is basically equivalent to Christianity in the real world. Even the ruler who shattered the Elden Ring, which is this sort of law of the universe or the world, or this type of concept or real thing, which is in a sense an ideology. Once again, as I've said in previous blogs, if you don't like spoilers, don't watch this video. But it represents an age, a philosophical, the sort of zeitgeist, so to speak. It's the spirit of the age. And they go into history of course, I'm just all over the place in this blog, but I'll be explaining everything. I mean, not in this blog, in this video, but I'll be explaining everything in my blog in the upcoming video. But the Erd Tree, and it basically represents Yggdrasil, or the Tree of Life, but it seems as though the symbolism is more than that. And I have a few ideas about that, but when I saw the final boss, the Elden Beast, was in the shape of a fish, I had to reflect on that. And not to mention the fact it was some type of constellation in the fish. The fish in astrology, the fish astrologically, if we're thinking about, and this game has astrology in it, it has alchemy, different types of occult sciences. There are references to astronomy as well. But if a person needed to know what this game is, it's basically about ages, about astrological ages to some extent, human culture, society. The former ruler, America, that's, as far as I know, Polish for Mary, which is another layer of interesting information due to the fact that America is basically on a cross. She has what is known as a Vaknut, and of course I am probably not pronouncing that right. It's also known as a tripod of life. If you see the symbol for Elden Ring, it has 3 circles. That represents Trinity, that represents unity, that is basically symbolized by the number 3 of completeness. Numerologically. It's very significant that they have a cross and that. In a sense, I think that the game's religion, so to speak, the America's religion, the Golden Order, the Erd Tree worship, so to speak, is heavily influenced by Rosicrucian Christianity, or what we might know as some more Gnostic forms of Christianity, which are very different from the Christianity that was spread by the apostles, that's been very thoroughly recorded in the histories of the Apostolic Fathers and the Ante-Nicene Fathers, which, I mean, you can find plenty of those books. Gnostic Christianity and the sort of Rosicrucian sort of alchemical ideas and metaphors that those particular individuals sort of apply are often used in Freemasonry or New Age religion, so to speak. It's a long history of conflict between authentic Christianity and Gnostic Christianity. In other words, Gnostic Christians they believe that salvation is through knowledge. They believe that through secret, esoteric knowledge they'll save themselves. I think the game's religion of the Erd Tree and the Golden Order is sort of a mixture of actual sort of a, in terms of archetype, it's sort of a mixture between Christianity and Gnosticism. Different concepts of alchemy apply. And it's hard to explain unless you actually play the game. It really is. But anyhow, back to the point I was trying to make. Essentially, when you play these games, you usually choose one of the two. You choose magic or you choose faith. And that's how the old D&D games worked. If you choose faith, basically you're choosing sort of the little Christian faction. If you choose magic, the magic faction, which in this case is Ronnie, the blue woman, who has 4 arms, and there are a lot of interesting connotations having to do with that. Usually a lot of these people I've seen who've been stating their opinions about the game and their different views of it, they seem to be more or less, how should I put this, either atheist, avowed pagans, witches, agnostic people. They usually choose Ronnie's side, and they really like Ronnie. Whereas some of the people who are more, I suppose, Christian, they really like the idea of the ending of, or the age of perfect order. They choose the gold mask and they go sort of down the faith route, so to speak. They sort of don't like the whole concept of Ronnie's Age of the Stars. I mean, there's only 6 endings, and only 2 of them are unique. If that doesn't say something to the players, if that's not considered to be a message that the developers are trying to send you, I don't know what is. Okay, I'd said in an earlier video about Demon Souls, when I was basically making connections between this game, Elden Ring, and Demon Souls, I'd basically said, 3, and it's true, 3 of the endings are just you sitting on the throne. If not, I mean 4 of the endings are basically you sitting on the throne. And some narrator basically says, this is the age of perfect order, or the age of order. And then there's another one of, this is the age of curses or omens or whatever. But other than that, there really isn't any difference. The only 2 unique endings are Ronnie's ending and the Frenzied Flame ending. And in my humble opinion, the developers are giving us a message. They're in subtle ways, I've noticed FromSoft sort of, and it's no surprise in art, we often see what the artists or the developers sort of favor. I don't think they favor order, so to speak. Apparently Miyazaki has said in interviews this game is about death and rebirth. But it leads me to believe that the fish, the final boss, the fish, represents the age of Pisces. Basically. The age of Pisces. Basically, in the real world, according to Theosophists, because this is a new concept, this idea of an age of Aquarius. Peradventure you know about it. Peradventure you don't know about it. But it is this idea of every age being associated with an astrological sign, with different cultures associated with each age. And the astrologers and of the theosophical discipline, and no one was talking about this before, no one was talking about a Christian Piscean age a long time ago. You can do research, you can read different astrological books. It's a new age concept. And that's where the idea of the new age came from, the new age of Aquarius. So much of the art and media that we consume are made by people who believe in these things. So what do? You kill God. It's just like in Final Fantasy. What do you do in Final Fantasy? You kill, regardless of which game it is, it usually has to do with some sort of entity that oversees everything, like Yevon, or it has to, all of these games have to do with some big church institution. They're the villain. And it seems as though Ronnie and Rhea Lucaria and this whole... Well, of course, the interesting thing is they are presented as villains. To some extent. she kills her brother so that she can escape her fate as becoming the next ruler of the lands between. This whole idea of an age. Oh, the age of America, of the Golden Order, of the Erd Tree is rotten. In other words, it's all of the children of America have horrible fates. It's the idea of the offspring is cursed because, as you can see in the video, you see this Erd Tree is burning, and basically from what I understand at this point, and it's just as I have said, I'm doing research every day, trying to understand references and symbolism and the narrative implications of this game, and so at this point, I think the Erd Tree itself represents an age, sort of the spirit, in a sense, of the age of the Golden Order, of America, of the greater will, which represents sort of a monotheistic concept of God, in a sense. And America sort of represents Jesus Christ. And what do you do in this game? Sort of, she's trying to destroy the age, and she's androgynous. So part of her is trying to destroy the age. The other part, Radagon, who apparently is sort of cursed, in a sense, has some type of giant curse. Apparently red hair in this game is related to giants. But the whole idea seems to indicate, and I'm just speaking off the cuff right now, I will be presenting all of the information and all of the details very soon, with so many citations. But right now I'm just basically rambling. As far as I'm concerned, America's age, or America's rule, everything that has to do with the Golden Order and the Erd Tree seem to represent some sort of archetypical Christian age of Pisces. And if it wasn't clear to us enough already, the very fact that once we defeat Radagon, we basically fight the spirit of this age, this sort of ethereal being that is a constellation of a fish, basically. And even if you look closely at the Elden Beast, it even has the tail of a fish. It's a fish. You're bringing the age of Pisces to an end. And many people who practice New Age religion, who practice witchcraft, they are depending on the idea and the concept, the understanding that at some point the Christian age, the Christian rule and Christian authority and Christian thought will end, and that it will be done away with. And they believe that they're going to institute or promote ideas that are superior. They consider the age of Aquarius to be an age of nonconformity, to be an age that is different from the Christian age, an age of non-dualism, an age in which binary philosophical understandings are gone. I mean, it's just like we looked at in the Demon Souls video, or just like we read in the Demon Souls blog. The New Age understanding, the using alchemy as a metaphor, so to speak, is that everything is basically one thing, and that everything can be converged. It's just like we see in the law of regression. Everything is going back. And in a sense, we see that in this game. We see the exact same thing, actually. Now, I'm going to be talking about I'm going to be reviewing in this blog and in the next video what seems to be sort of an impersonal, or rather an understanding of an impersonal force, which is being described as the primeval current, and how that contrasts with the greater will, which is sort of an understanding of a personal God or a personal deity in a monotheistic, or in the sense of monolatry. In other words, one God, essentially, or a supreme God among many. But nonetheless, there certainly is a conflict and a sort of juxtaposition in this narrative, which is interesting. There seems, and I know there's a conflict in the game, even using the mechanics, intelligence and faith. Those people who rely upon intelligence, or those people who rely upon faith. The scholars of Raya Lucaria, and basically the magic practitioners. And what I found thus far is that apparently Lusat, or whoever, since I haven't written it down, I can't remember all of these names, but anyhow, one of the glintstone sorcerers basically saw the primeval current and some type of force in the darkness of the firmament, of space, whatever you want to call it. And it was a very interesting description of one of his spells, Comet Azor. And basically it states that he beheld the darkness of space, and basically he saw this primeval current, whatever type of force or energy this was. He looked in space and he saw just darkness, and apparently this darkness was so disturbing to him, it sort of drove him mad. So the primeval sorcerers they sort of explain the worldview, for the most part, of the magicians, of the magic users, so to speak, because the worldviews are obviously different for the most part. The glintstone sorcerers don't, for the most part, seem to perceive or even believe in the greater will necessarily. In other words, if the greater will and the worship of the greater will in the herb tree, or some type of plays the narrative role as Christianity in this game, then the glintstone magicians, so to speak, and I know I'm using a lot of different names for them, but I'm just speaking in the abstract. I'm not talking about any particular NPC or using any particular names, so to speak. I'm just talking about the very abstract concepts and narrative tools that are being used. seem to basically be, it's basically Christians and pagans. It's just like I said it was in Demon Souls. It would seem. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what it is, but what I'm saying is that seems to be a similar divide to what is being presented to us in a narrative fashion. It's very interesting. And I suppose if you gazed into space, like the item description of this particular spell Carmen Azor says, or another particular spell that is presented in the game, which is created by another primeval sorcerer, that says basically he beheld a star cluster in space basically explode, and it was such a troubling thing to him that basically he went mad. It's very strange. So it's the idea of looking into space and beholding nothing but darkness and not really having any conception of anything else. It's almost as though you feel as though you gazed into space, and maybe even if you weren't particularly faithful, maybe the idea or the faint hope of there being something other than just complete darkness, or just some type of impersonal, cold, sort of meaningless energy or void was in you. Maybe even in their sort of atheistic or agnostic state, they believed that there has to be something if I look for it enough. I mean, maybe if I see it. So basically, this is the idea of complete, cold, sort of calculating understandings of there's nothing else in the cosmos but darkness and space and impersonal forces. It's very philosophically, if you consider the implications of what is presented in this game from the primeval sorceries, and it's a very short storyline having to do with the primeval sorcerers and Sorcerer Cellin. It's very interesting because I think in that narrative, in that particular way of presenting something, you basically capture what I consider to be the very essence of atheism, which is that, and it is in its darkest sense, which is space, which is the so-called reality of empty space, which is just nothing's there. It's cold, it's dark, and there's a lot of things like that are presented. And that's in contrast to the Golden Order and the Urge Free worshippers who believe in a deity, in a god, in a supreme being. And it's not Christian, but it's the archetype for Christian. Many of us who are playing this game are Christian. Some are agnostic, some are atheists. But I think everyone sort of chooses their own preferred group, so to speak. But the Erdtree worshippers, in contrast to the glintstone sorcerers, have faith. And even when you read the item descriptions, the glintstone sorcerers don't like their sorceries to have anything regarding faith. Now, is that faith as in sort of a real type of sense? In other words, we know that in order to know something, let's say you have intelligence, you have an understanding, you still need some element of faith. for the most part. Now, some people would say otherwise, but this is just the truth. How can you do anything, really have confidence in ideas and concepts, if you don't have faith in them? So, ever since D&D, you've had a stat list. Dexterity, you've had faith, intelligence, strength, all of these. They have a gameplay purpose, not so much a narrative purpose usually. They do have a narrative purpose, but it's very artificial because that's not how life works. Of course, you as an individual have intelligence, but obviously you also have faith. Alright? Now you may have varying degrees of strength or agility or what have you. I'm just going to replay this video. It's really the only thing I have here to watch as I'm talking. So, I mean, I suppose it's better than just looking at an empty screen. But anyhow, D&D was the first type of game where you sort of had these types of stats. But I think FromSoft basically has been able to use them as a conceptual basis for their narrative effectively. And the Glintstone sorcerers are, it's just like many people today in a sense, and it's very strange, and I didn't really realize this until I started to look at some different types of media, especially in the witchcraft and pagan communities, and I realized there's a lot of witches who call themselves atheists. I'm not joking. These same witches will say, I believe in spirits, I believe in demons. I actually invoke spirits or demons to get what I want. And I think many of these individuals will literally say, well, I'm also an atheist. I don't believe in a god or what have you, but you believe in something that is metaphysical. And in a sense, many of these people actually do worship. They have altars and many other such things. A god, in an abstract sense, is basically a ruler, someone worthy of worship, worthy of praise, and adulation. God is a very abstract word. A king can be considered a god, for example. A lot of witches and a lot of pagans worship the earth or the mother goddess or whoever. But many of these people will still say, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in anything. So there's a connection between atheism, agnosticism, as far as I'm concerned, and modern day witchcraft and modern day paganism. Modern day paganism is entirely different from paganism of the pre-Christian era and the early Christian era. It simply is. There are written records of grimoires. There are a massive amount of free Masonic text. And there's more, I suppose, what you'd call academic occultism and sorcery. There's a history of that. But as far as Druids, pre-Christian religion, so Viking religion, sure, there's the Eddas, but as far as that is concerned, there isn't much in terms of actual written records. European culture and civilization at that time was was very primitive in certain areas, such as the Germanic peoples. The British, Irish, these were pagan peoples, but they didn't have real systems of writing. It was a very barbaric culture. There are a lot of people who say, I'm a pagan, and they talk about how old their religion is. It's not that old. Even Wicca itself is not that old. Modern day paganism itself is not that old. Because most of what they're referring to has not even been written down. But I've noticed that the academic circles, much that comes from the universities today. Not to say and many people don't seem to understand that universities, they're very affected by religious culture. And it seems for the most part in most universities and colleges, and most of our education curriculum is sort of distanced from Christianity at this point. People who practice New Age religion believe in a real New Age, in the Christian age. They consider the Christian age to be a regressive age, one in which the people are dominated by an authoritarian sort of mindset or constraint. They believe that Christianity, the very concept itself, is oppressive. And some of these beliefs are also applied to Islam and Judaism. But the cruelty of pagan civilizations are not, for the most part, actually addressed often. But they exist in history, and they've been recorded. When the Romans came to Britain, to Ireland, they had seen a great deal of human sacrifice, and it's been recorded. The Roman Empire, they have a long history of orgies, revels. This is all historically recorded. But there is a concept in this game that seems to indicate that, and I've heard of people talk about it, basically it's the idea that things need to be reborn, that the age of Pisces needs to be displaced somehow. And I think in this game it's indicated that the age of America, the age of the Golden Order, of the Erd Tree, it's just old, and it's inefficient, it's ineffective, it needs to be displaced, and a new age needs to rise. And I think the reason they paid so much attention to detail to the age of the stars in Elden Ring is because that is what they're promoting. That's my opinion. Most people don't see the other endings as enjoyable. The only endings that seem to be enjoyable are the Frenzied Flame ending and the Age of the Stars ending. But it seems as though all of the endings, even the Perfect Order ending, seems to, and there's a lot of implications behind that. To be entirely honest, I'm going to talk far more about that. But do pay close attention to detail to all of those item descriptions having to do with it. Age of Perfect Order and the Gold Mask idea, or rather, all of that. Basically, the idea is that because of human corruption, that age was flawed, and therefore you sort of need to take the human element of it out in order for it to be perfect, or you need to sort of have perfect people who don't deviate from a certain standard of conduct. But personally, I think in this game, the whole idea of the Golden Order and the Erd Tree is that they need to be destroyed. They should never come again. It should be entirely wiped away. It's just like I remember in Dark Souls 3, the last time you link the fire, it's barely, it's not, and maybe you know, but basically you sacrifice yourself to continue the age. And these games, all they're about is ages. They're all about the stagnation of an age, of a culture, of a civilization. And if the culture, if the civilization, if the age becomes, how should I say, well, stagnated, if the age is somehow destructive in some sense, or this idea that an age is basically, it isn't evolving man, it therefore must be destroyed. And they even talk about de-evolution in this game in regard to the Crucible. That's a whole nother matter of them using the concept of alchemy as a metaphor. And do I think Miyazaki is an actual alchemist? Or any of these people who make these games about alchemy? It's just like, what's the other game? Atelier, the one with the French name, and many of the other JRPGs and RPGs that talk about alchemy. I don't think any of those people study alchemy. I'll just be honest. Alchemy is a technical science. It really is. Not on a philosophical level, but on a technical, practical level. It's a very technical science that it's basically much like chemistry. And it takes a great deal of technical knowledge. It takes a great deal of patience. It's basically working with metals. Not that I practice, but I've read enough and actually seen enough alchemy, real alchemy, to know that these people in these video games, or rather these people creating these video games, these people creating this art that we see on a daily basis, movies, they're using alchemy as a metaphor. They're basically saying, and I'll just say this, the continued element of these narratives that continues to be promoted to us as the players, as the viewers, is that everything needs to return to one thing. Things sort of need to converge and sort of come into a sort of, how should I put this? They sort of need to basically become one. That's what the Frenzied Flame ending seemed to indicate. And as far as the Age of the Stars ending was a very interesting thing. That people were saying, Ronnie, who is the woman I was just talking about with the blue skin. Maybe you've seen her. She has 4 arms, like the Hindu goddess Kali. Her skin is blue. Blue is the color of heaven. Many Indian gods have blue skin. Need I say more? And of course I'm going to say more in my upcoming blog, in my upcoming video that's going to be basically commentary for that blog. I'm going to be talking about her and the Dark Moon, which is a whole, The dark moon represents secrecy. It represents the highest of black magic. And in a sense, it is the most mysterious of moons. It's people were saying that Ronnie's dialogue, that her script was mistranslated. And people were saying, oh, Ronnie's being shown to be more of a villain than she is, or rather, they're making Ronnie seem evil because they mistranslated it, and everyone thinks Ronnie's evil. Ronnie, basically, if you've played the game, if you won the game, she wants to return to the stars. She wants to destroy the Golden Order. She said, well, I'm going to take the order to the stars. And when I looked at the Japanese translation, it was basically the same translation. It had the same implications. And people are saying, oh, they made Ronnie seem evil. Ronnie's saying the same thing. She's saying basically something akin in purpose to what the primeval sorcerer was saying, which is that I looked into space, I saw nothing but darkness. Ronnie says, you won't even be able to believe in the Golden Order. I'm going to take the Golden Order up into space with me, and we're going to have an order of the stars, and everything's going to be dark and mysterious. People don't understand the implications of a dark moon. The dark moon is the moon of black magicians. It's the moon of black witches and black witchcraft. Now, if the full moon represents illumination, the dark moon represents, in terms of the triple goddess, Hecate. Because there's 3 moon goddesses. There's Selene, there's, who else? I forget. I mean, but there's a long history of this. Artemis, Hecate. Hecate is known as the crone. There's an item description that talks about a crone in Ronnie's questline. It's amazing. They're basically just they're reiterating, or rather they're showing us magical concepts in this game. They're presenting them to us. Most people are entirely unconcerned, or they don't know much about witchcraft. if a practitioner of Wicca, which basically means witchcraft, Wicca means the same thing as witchcraft. These are very obvious connotations to draw. I mean, it's this religion that's been created recently, to be entirely honest, in terms of its age. Wicca is a new religion. Modern day paganism, for the most part, is drawn from older traditions, but it is, they have their own type of systems that have been drawn from older traditions. It's not an old religion, despite what many of them say. They say, oh, Christianity isn't old. It all came from Sumeria and Zoroastrianism. And I'm thinking, you literally have no proof. You've made assumptions. They believe in what is called theocracy, mingling of gods. In other words, one god from one particular age or concept, they relate to one in the future. So they'll say one god is, for example, a god worshipped by these people. They just call it by a different name. We as Christians, we don't believe that. Muslims don't believe that. Jews don't believe that. We don't believe we worship Thor. We don't believe we worship Ahura Mazda or any of these other gods. And regardless of the similarities that they try to attach to different religions, it's simply speculation. In the academic sense, these theories that are created in esoteric and occult circles are basically considered nearly to be basically fact, and they're not. They're speculations that they create. But anyhow, the dark moon has all sorts of implications. So what does Ronnie say? She basically says, I'm going to take faith itself, the faith you have in God, and you won't be able to, basically she's doing what is known as preserving the mysteries. The lodge in Freemasonry is known as the sort of House of Isis. And she's the keeper of the mysteries. And the idea of Gnosticism, the idea of paganism and witchcraft is that certain people should know the mysteries of occultism, of the universe, and other people should not know. And these people will have no salvation, basically. They do believe in reincarnation, but they believe that those who have secret knowledge will obtain godhood, basically. And all of these games we play, whether it be Elden Ring or Kingdoms of Amalur and so many other games, they basically have a similar premise. You become God, or you become God-like, or whatever you would call it. But it's usually the same premise that they use. But yes, I think I've figured out this puzzle, and by that I mean to say Elden Ring. I think I've figured out this puzzle. And every time I go through one of these pieces of media and I examine it, I look at the symbolism and I sort of gain an understanding of it, it's being able to understand it symbolically and understand occult connections. It's a very difficult thing to do. It took me a lot of thinking. It's just, as I say, deep thinking, meditation on what any of this could mean. And you see on YouTube, there's plenty of people talking about the lore of Elden Ring and Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and they know what happens in the story. They don't know what the story means, or they don't have any sort of, how should I put this, sort of ideologically coherent understanding of what the story means and what the symbols in it represent. They don't have any sort of philosophical basis for a lot of the things that are presented in it. Everything represents something. The sun, the moon, the blood in Bloodborne, all of this. A person should ask the question, why would anyone be so intent, so fervorous as to create a game or something that has such complex concepts? Let's say I made a game that has some complex concepts behind it, like this. Oh, it's the Erd Tree, and this is like, the light of the world, and there are concepts here most people, they have no conception of what they mean. They don't even have an idea. And they don't even think about it. They just think, oh, what did this character do? What did that character do? Is this character, what is this character trying to achieve, or what type of connections does this character have? Who do I like in the game, and who do I not like in the game? And as I was saying, I was looking at the video by Cassidiv, and basically, this is a college-educated woman. But you can clearly see that she has chosen her side, who she likes in the story and who she doesn't like. And her channel is literally, it's Cassitive, Cassative. Alright? If she's watching this video, hello. Hi. But I'm almost certain she isn't. But anyhow, I mean, this is a small channel. I only have like 5 subscribers. I'm sure she doesn't care. But it's, I mean, you can sort of tell by her blogs and by her videos, she has very low opinion of the Golden Order. And that's how most people are. It's more or less, if you think that there should be a type of order in the world that is sort of stable, you more or less go with the Christian archetype. If you don't like the sort of stability of belief and faith and just the regular people's views, because the common people in this game, they basically are part of the Golden Order religion, the Earth Tree religion, the sort of archetypical, the sort of, as I said, archetype of Christianity in this game. But if you are against that, if you think, well, people are just faithful, and they have too much faith, and they're stupid, and you don't really respect them or their beliefs, you say, I choose the magic archetype, the witchcraft archetype, the sort of atheistic, agnostic archetype. Look into the universe and you see nothing but darkness. They see two different things. The primeval sorcerer looks up into the sky and sees darkness. And that to him is terrifying. That's literally what the item description of the Common Azor says, I believe. Right now I'm not really being very accurate because I'm just talking, rambling, so to speak, being outspoken, long-winded. And what do the Erd Tree faithful see? What do the Erd Tree worshippers and the Golden Order people see when they look up at the sky? They see not only darkness, they believe, well, of course they see their pretty Erd Tree, which is beautiful and golden, but they basically, it's that concept of, it's just like a Christian. A Christian looks at the sky, he believes above the sky is the kingdom of heaven. And that even goes back to the whole understanding of the firmament. And she brought up the fact that Empyrean is basically, in the game, the word Empyrean is used, it means highest heaven. Ronnie does not want to become an Empyrean. Another Empyrean or person who was to replace America as ruler was also the Dusk Queen or the Gloom-Eyed Queen or whatever her name is, and she decides not to become an Empyrean either, and they have the sort of black flame which we saw in Dark Souls represented humanity, or the impenetrable flames of humanity. They reuse concepts in the Souls games. We all know this. They reuse just about everything, and most things have a similar meaning from game to game, which is very interesting. That's what I've noticed. But usually who you like in these games, who you favor, who you side with, at least on a philosophical level, has to do with basically what you believe and what you think in general in the real world. And I think in this game more than other games you see that. So most of the atheists, most of the agnostics, most of the witches, they are sort of more or less endeared to Ronnie. Now I could talk about the Frenzied Flame, but I feel as though I should talk about that later. And if you've seen my Demon Souls blog video, or if you've read the blog, you sort of know what I think about that. It's mostly most of the talk is around Ronnie, and there was a lot of talk. Oh, the United States version or the English version of the different language versions of Ronnie were mistranslated. But to be entirely honest, when I had seen the Japanese translation, the English translation of the Japanese script of the dialogue, it seemed to me the English translation was more substantial in terms of meaning than the Japanese dialogue. And what is more, the Japanese dialogue actually convinced me even more so of Ronnie's intentions in her Age of the Stars ending. She says, this is the path of the Dark Empyrean. This is the path of the Dark Moon. A lot of people say, oh, Ronnie isn't evil. But truth be told, Ronnie, in a sense, is trying to invert things. Life in general. What would it be like to live in the age of Ronnie in Elden Ring? For one thing, she's taken the order. You won't know anything about the order of the universe, the essence of existence, because she's taking it into the darkness of space. In other words, belief isn't going to, you're not going to be able to even believe in the Golden Order anymore. So you can see how she is, in a sense, taking the faith of the common people, and she's basically taking it away from them. So there's a reason a lot of people, I think in a sense, in their hearts, they sort of felt, a lot of people who played this game, a lot of people were very disturbed by Ronnie's ending. And you see, the media oftentimes is very accommodating and is very mainstream media in general. I've noticed it's very conciliatory, very amenable to paganism in general, to sort of how should I put this? New Age ideas and cultural things that may be considered to be aligned with witchcraft or New Age religion, theosophy, whatever you want to call these traditions. Many of which are very recent in terms of just overall conceptual study and groundwork. You know, in other words, the witchcraft of 1,000 years ago is not the witchcraft of today. It isn't, basically. But it's almost as though most of the media I have seen is promoting Ronnie. They don't, and I will show you, peradventure, in the video that I do about Elden Ring, I will show you some of the articles that I've seen that have come out about the translation issue, because the interesting thing is FromSoft hasn't said anything. It's the community and it's the media that we see say, hey, I know you think Ronnie's bad, but it was mistranslated. Don't think bad of her. She's a good person. Even Castiff is literally saying Ronnie was trying to protect her brother, so she killed him. And basically, Ronnie's brother is apparently they say his soul died, but his body still lives, and it's become some type of weird zombie creature. And the implication is that the whole of the lands between are literally going to be taken over by his body, which is growing underground and is becoming something. It's It's connected with roots that are basically spreading throughout the entire world. But it's very disturbing. Ronnie also plotted with Praetor Rykard, and if you want to see how disgusting Praetor Rykard is in the game, go to his area and see how many dead bodies are there and how many people are hanging. It's disgusting. And Praetor Rykard basically sacrificed himself to a giant serpent. Okay? Some people say, well, evil is subjective. There's no such... Of course we have our own interpretation of what is right, wrong, good, or evil. But there's sort of the problem that I think the media and many of what many people call the Ronnie simps, the simps for Ronnie, the sort of fanboys for Ronnie, because she's the great waifu that they love so much, is this. They have started to recognize there's a consensus of people who don't like Ronnie, and people were criticizing Ronnie a bit too much, and in this game she promotes the pagan narrative. And so in media there is sort of a preference in most media for pagan and Wiccan narratives, so to speak. But that's just my perception. That's just my perspective. It's based on what I've seen, what I've experienced, and what I have viewed in media. Maybe that's not your understanding. Maybe you even are a witch. Maybe you have an entirely different understanding. Maybe you think the media is just full of Christian symbolism or what have you. I entirely digress. I entirely disagree, and I can hardly understand how you would come to such an understanding, because basically all of our media, so much media. When is the last video game you've seen that even mentioned the name Jesus Christ? Or, even in movies, Jesus isn't even mentioned that much. Most things that have to do with Christianity are not even mentioned. You can go a whole day on just watching television or just going through different sources of media, and you won't see a single thing about Jesus Christ. But according to a lot of witches, there's this idea that, Christians have dominated everything. There's too many Christians. In a sense, you could say that is sort of the idea behind this game. The age of America, it's just everywhere. It's rotten. It's regression. And the age of America is de-evolving everyone because everyone's a faithful person. And they even have, for example, for the people who, the commoner's clothing, the clothing of the everyday person in the lands between, they literally have shackles on their shirts. And it's not as though they themselves are shackles. The shackles, they literally say, they're symbolic. It's symbolic of Erd Tree worship to have these shackles. I'm not even joking. It's like a little thing you would put a prisoner in. That, like type of, it's not handcuffs, but it's, I don't know what the word is. Okay, and basically, even with a small understanding of symbolism, we can tell that sort of represents you're being restrained by something. You're being sort of, how should I say, arrested by something. You're sort of being, something is sort of holding you in place. Or rather, and that's not even, there's a negative connotation. It's almost as though you're in bondage. That's the word. You're in bondage. And so, to me, that represents a sort of antipathy that the artist has towards Christians and Christianity in general. They're saying, you people who believe in God, who have this sort of, as they would call it, dogmatic faith, Or they even have a blindfold. And that can represent blind faith. And I'm not saying that the connotations that they're presenting are things that they necessarily consider to be completely negative. But I think there is an aspect of, or rather an understanding, that is very clearly visible if you play this game and if you contemplate what is presented in it. I think you can sort of discern that this is being presented in somewhat of a negative way. Now that can only be an opinion, but for me and for others who I'm doing these videos for, as Christians, they might very well come to the conclusion, I don't think they like us so much. Because we as Christians recognize that the age of America basically, in an archetypical narrative sense, represents us. And the same thing is done in many games, but in this one you feel it all the more because they take America and they basically crucify her like Jesus Christ. Now for us, the death of Jesus Christ, he was resurrected. Well, what happens in Elden Ring? America is on the cross. This type of, it's a Tau, T-A-U symbol. It's a T-type cross, which if you do study into symbolism, you recognize that symbol is sometimes used in place of a cross. It has its own connotations, implications, and different interpretations. But what it represents is what America represents is basically a messianic figure, a type of Jesus. Now, in the biblical gospel, Jesus is resurrected after his death. What happens to America? And Radagon. Now, the androgyny of America and Radagon is really interesting. There were a lot of old traditions and religions of different gods who were, how should I put this, androgynous. They weren't considered male or female, but that's something I'm going to review in an upcoming video as well. But America is not, I just use I just use America's name because I could say American Radagon America. They're both the same individual. So basically, is she resurrected? She isn't resurrected. The age that comes after the age of America is going to be a new age. And I just tell you what I symbolically think that is. The idea is that it's not America that has the power. It's this constellation, the age of Pisces, this big fish, the Elden Beast that has the power. It represents the age of the Golden Order. Pisces, according to New Age people, and they're the only people who seem to really talk like this. Who else talks about the age of Aquarius? Read books about old astrology. They weren't talking about the age of Aquarius. New Age believers believe the Christian age is the age of Pisces. It's going to be destroyed. Everything about it's going to be destroyed. The New Age is going to be entirely different. Therefore, what do you do in this game? You destroy Pisces. You destroy the big fish. This is what New Age people believe. So, I've basically apprehended this entire story. And it took me a while. And, what I've presented to you is just a rant. It's just a ramble. It's just me talking. It's just stream of thought. I'm just saying whatever comes off my head at this point. It's just me meditating about this for a little while. And I'm sure it's all types of coherent. This is probably going to be a very difficult video to listen to. which is why I put a little gameplay in the background, because I thought, well, you know, I mean, it's the gameplay is not that good, but maybe I'll do better next time. I don't know. And this is on a base PS4. I don't have money for a PS5. I don't even have money for PS Pro at this point. Times are hard for me, at least. But yes. It's about the end of an age. And you know, I mean, even think about that concept. Let's say I create a fictional Jesus to make a point. Okay? Androgynous or not, let's say I created a fictional individual that sort of represented Christ or Jesus, that's in the same position. She even has a spear in her side, in the side of her body. She even has a spear in the side of her body. Just like Jesus. But is she resurrected? No, you see this big fish takes her body and just puts it in this sort of prima materia, this sort of alkahest, which is basically this alchemical concept of a universal solvent that destroys and melts everything down, by which you can get at the essence of something. The alchemists believed, and in this sort of philosophical type of, not necessarily philosophical, but religious type alchemy, of destroying an age, they're saying the essence of America has been consumed and basically turned into something. And what happens is you get a sword, that this, after you defeat this Elden beast, he takes America and turns her into a sword. But basically, America is not resurrected. There's a type of real, I don't know how you would consider it to not be disrespectful. Alright, you create an archetype of Jesus. This Jesus doesn't resurrect, though, and sort of dies, and I suppose is a very inglorious fashion. And it literally says in the item description, this is like the death of an age. This is the end of an age. And they're giving us a very clear message in this game. They're saying, this is the end of the Christian age. This is the end of the Piscean age. We even put the fish here. So if you folks have enough understanding of symbolism, you know what this astrological fish means. It means Pisces. The New Age people came to this idea that the age of Pisces is the Christian age because Jesus was basically multiplying fish. And they said, by that story, Jesus is associated with fish. This is the age of Pisces. Therefore, he is represented, and his values and belief system is represented by this fish. This is why they try to degrade Christianity in any way they can, particular individuals who are adherents of Theosophical, also known as New Age religion, as well as witchcraft, or what we might call Wicca. They wish to de-emphasize it in culture. They wish to not have a dualistic sense of right and wrong, but they wish to have a subjective understanding of right, wrong, and truth. Many of these people believe in monism. They believe that all differences are the arbitrary biases of the individual and therefore are not to be regarded. It's very interesting. But these are just my observations. To be entirely honest, these are just my meditations. And you probably have or think something different. It's just like I've said, I don't know how many of you people are witches, pagans, what religion you practice. To me, it doesn't matter to me. This whole channel, all of the blogs, they're all about education. I mean, you're going to learn about symbolism, you're going to learn about philosophy, narrative implications. At this point, I don't know how a person would not become familiar with philosophical concepts like non-dualism, non-duality, monism. at this point, because it's everywhere, it would seem, in culture, media, movies, video games, everything. It seems to me as though most media is telling me, don't be concerned with right and wrong, or that right and wrong are ambiguous things subject to your own understandings. Ronnie, don't think of her as evil. So says many media publications and the people who are basically trying to affect public opinion about Ronnie. Once again, that was a very strange discovery. But I hope, as you maybe watch my videos or read my blogs, maybe you'll sort of have some ideological stability. Maybe you'll be able to think more for yourself. And I hope that's possible. I really do. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm right about anything. But what I am saying is that we should think about what we see. We should meditate upon it. And we should ask the question, what are the people in media, the people who create this media, trying to teach us? That's what I'm interested in. So, I mean, this was just me rambling. Just me basically sharing my mind, sharing my thoughts. So, bless you. Goodbye. Have a good life. Okay, I'm going to end it now.